Hey Retro fans, welcome to episode 12 of Retro Gaming Memories. In this episode I'm going to be talking about the little box of tricks that is the ZX Spectrum 48K model, because that's all you needed back in the day. Now, as most of you are probably aware, I never had a Spectrum back in the day. I had an Amstrad. But the cool thing is because there were so many computers back in the 80s, even if you had an Amstrad or a Commodore or whatever, you would meet friends who had probably the same machine as you, but then they had friends who had a different machine from you. So that's that's how I experienced a few different machines. That's how I experienced the Commodore 64 and how I experienced the Spectrum. A friend of a friend had a Spectrum, and one of his friends had a Spectrum, and we used to all hang about in this kind of group of probably computer nerds, but yeah, so he had a Spectrum, and that's where I played most of my Spectrum games and kind of experienced it all. It wasn't until many years later that I actually ended up buying a Spectrum. And the first machine I actually bought was a Spectrum Plus 2, because it had the built-in tape deck. It was the one that was made by Amstrad, and it had the built-in tape deck and all that, so it was a convenience thing when I bought it. Plus I think it was the 128K RAM model, so it meant I could play sort of enhanced versions of games and things like that. But I realised that with most of these retro things, even if I've never owned a machine, I want to experience the thing that I did back in the day. So it was the kind of rubber keyed Spectrum that I wanted to play on. Playing on a full sort of QWERTY keyboard with hard keys and things like the Plus 2 model didn't quite feel right. And although one of my friends had a Plus 2 back in the day, it kind of felt weird at the time as well. It felt like a Spectrum wrapped in an Amstrad box. And as much as I love my Amstrad stuff, the Spectrum kind of buy over thing wasn't the right thing to do. It was good to save it, but at the same time I think Amstrad went the wrong way with it. They should have kept the Spectrum legacy, but that's probably a whole other video. Anyway, it was a 48K Spectrum that I sort of hankered after playing again. And for this sort of pure experience, I suppose, that's what you want, So I bought the Spectrum, which, this one here, and I think this is in pretty nice condition. Let's see if we can get it in. There's no dings or marks or anything on it, and it's all original. I did have another one which had you can buy the Repro overlays, and it was in pretty good condition as well. But I actually bought this one, really nice condition, and I did the sort of AV mod thing on it, although it doesn't look any different. But inside you can do the RGB mod thing. So yeah, it's really nice condition, plays perfectly, the membrane and all that's all good. It's nice and clean inside, which is a good bonus, because I know that the membranes and things on these tend to go. But yeah, the Spectrum, I do love it. I've got a fondness for it. There's a weird thing about the Spectrum, and this is a bit of an admission. I love the keyboard on it. Now, I don't know what it was like to type on it or try and program or any of that kind of stuff, but the feel, those dead flesh keyboard keys as they were called, when you're playing a game, it feels really nice. I don't know, it's weird. And I have got it's not a bit of a thing, that sounds weird, but keyboards, because they're your main interface into your computer, they're very important. And there were some keyboards on retro machines that I loved, and there were some that I didn't. I absolutely loved my favourite keyboard, I think, which sounds really stupid, was I think it was Toshiba that made it. It was the MSX. It was their port of the MSX. My pal had one. The only guy I ever knew with an MSX. But he had an MSX, and the keyboard on that was brilliant. Felt really nice. It felt like you were typing on Opal Fruits or Starburst or whatever the hell they're called now. Slightly spongy, but reassuringly plasticky. It's really hard to explain, but it made a great noise when you pressed it. And the Spectrum's a bit like that as well. that kind of, I don't know if the mic's picking it up, well, you know what it sounds like, but that kind of muted rubber thud, which is no like typing on a normal keyboard now, obviously, but I really like that keyboard to play on, and even now playing games, it just feels right. And I've completely lost track of what the hell I was talking about, but yeah, Spectrums, like I say, it was my friends. It was a chap called Blair Eastwood that I used to play all my games at his house, and he had a little kind of Spectrum setup, and it was great, and it was really nice because we never used to have the Spectrums are better than Amstrads, are better than Commodore 64s type thing. There was a few guys in primary school did have that whole battle, but we just kind of enjoyed the machines for what they were, and used to enjoy going to each other's houses. Like I say, between the group of friends, there was a few Spectrums, a couple of Amstrads, a couple of C64s, and we used to go and play the games that were best on that machine. So I used to like just experiencing all these different games, Way of the Exploding Fist. Although I love the Amstrad port, the C64 port is probably the best one, because that's what I used to play it on most. But there's loads of ports on the Amstrad that I really like, and there's loads of ports on the Spectrum that I really like. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those, well, I suppose now, because the main thing about the Specky, I'm not going to go into all the tech specs and all that kind of stuff. Suffice it to say, 48K for me is the way to go. I've had 128K machines, and I've seen what the 128K machines can do, and it's really nice. But back in the day, I didn't have 128K access to 128K. It was a 48K machine. So for me, the nostalgia is all built into the 48K model. So anyway, some of the games on the Spectrum were fantastic. The Ultimate series, the Ultimate Play the Game series, I was always, don't know if jealous is the right word, but most of the Ultimate games never came out on the Amstrad, and there were some games that I loved on the Spectrum that you couldn't get on the Amstrad, and it was really nice. Back in the day, Blair, my pal Blair that had the Spectrum, he and I would swap machines for a while. So like he'd borrow my Amstrad or my Atari or whatever. He'd have that for a week and he'd give me his Spectrum for a week, and I got to sort of spend time with some of these games, which was great, because when you're at a pal's house, you would play the game for whatever, half an hour or whatever, but you were always kind of taking turns, and you had a quick shot, but you could never really kind of get into the game and enjoy it in your own time. So when he used to give me a loan of his Spectrum, I'd get a bundle of tapes off him, and it was great fun, going and asking your parents, can we swap machines? Aye, okay, that's fine. So he had a lot of the, like probably most Spectrum owners back in the day, he had a lot of the Ultimate Play the Game games. And I remember my first experience of the Spectrum. Again, you had heard kind of rumours. Now you've got to put this into context of when you were a kid back in the day. You didn't really know, there wasn't social media or anything like that where people would push the strength or slag machines or whatever. It was all hearsay off of friends or whatever else. So I'd heard there was a couple of guys in jest. One of my pals had an older brother, and he used to say, "Oh, the Spectrum, it's got like 4 colours, and it's got a tribute clash and all that kind of stuff, colour clash." But when I was a 8-year-old kid, I didn't know what any of that meant, and I didn't really care, because graphics, whilst they're nice, they're not the be all and end all of a game. Growing up with Atari 2600, graphics were pretty much non-existent, so that didn't matter to me. But because he was older, it kind of obviously mattered to him. But anyway, so when I first experienced the Spectrum, I wasn't aware or didn't think much of it, that it was kind of sort of monochrome, or that the sprites were one colour but were essentially see-through or whatever, any of that. That didn't bother me at all. It didn't mean anything to me, and I didn't think, oh, that looks rubbish or anything like that. I have a lot of fondness for that, which I'll go into in a little minute. my pal, like I was saying, he had these Ultimate games, and he showed me Jetpack. He loaded up Jetpack. I think that was one of the first Spectrum games I ever played. And he loaded up Jetpack, and it was. I remember watching it loading because the loading system is very slightly different to the Amstrad. So I was intrigued to see how a Spectrum loaded games, and it did it differently because it loaded the whole thing in, and you would hear it doing its squeaks and pips and all that kind of stuff, the noise that we all love. But then it drew the whole screen, and I wonder, it was almost like it loaded it in memory and then just went, and there you go, there's your loading screen. And I loved that. I was like, oh, that's brilliant. And it flashed. There was I can't mind if it just says loading or if it's the Ultimate logo or whatever, kind of flashes. I think it says Jetpack is now loading, and it keeps flashing as it's loading. And I'm like, oh, look at that, that's amazing. I'd never seen that before because I was just used to static screens. So daft wee things like that impressed me back in the day, and the kids still kind of do. But anyway, we loaded up Jetpack, and it was amazing to see it because it just, although it was very simple, it was so smooth and kind of frantic. And the noises that it made, I still love the noises that the Spectrums make. The fact that I can't actually remember what sound chip or beeper is in the Spectrum, but those little kind of clicks that it makes, I don't know how to describe it, but Spectrum people know what I mean. The noise, if you imagine the noise of Jetpack, the noise of the lasers and stuff like that, it's little clicks, and when you die, it's that mad wee noises like that. I love all that stuff. The fact that it came out of that little speaker, it didn't come out your TV or anything like that. It was just a little Spectrum doing its thing, making Spectrum noises. And I loved it, and I was hooked, and I played Jetpack. Jetpack's my kind of game. It's single screen, it's kind of arcade game. Single screen, you know immediately what you need to do. You don't need to read instructions or anything like that. And there's bad guys, you've got a gun, you need to collect stuff and build your rocket, go for it. And it was brilliant, and it was so simple, easy to pick up, and I still play it to this day. And if you've watched my retro room tour thing, you'll have seen that I've actually got a port of it for the Amstrad. Somebody pulled it apart and recoded it and all that kind of stuff, and made a port of it for the Amstrad. Because the Spectrum and the Amstrad shared very similar architecture and similar chips, it was kind of easy to port between the two machines. But some homebrew coder has done a port of Jetpack to the Amstrad. And whilst it's great fun to play, and it does a sterling job, it looks the part and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't feel quite right. It's nice to have it, and it's intriguing to wonder if it's what it would have been like had Ultimate actually done the port themselves back in the day. But it's nice to have, and it's nice to be able to play on the Amstrad. But if I want to play Jetpack, I fire up the Spectrum because that's the way to play it. But yeah, so Jetpack was just brilliant, and I was blown away by how colourful it was. Although it's obviously a black screen, there was so much going on, and it was so smooth, and the colours, the sprites, I didn't know at the time the sort of high definition type thing, but the sprites looked so well defined compared to the kind of Amstrad, which relied more on. It had more colours, the Amstrad, but it relied more on the sort of arcade thing of scan lines to blur in between pixels and make things look kind of better than they actually were. Excuse me. But the Spectrum was kind of clearly defined. There's your sprite, and it might have been see-through, but it really didn't matter. It played really well, and it looked nice. So I love Jetpack. Played it for hours, and I still do. I love firing up Jetpack. I actually bought the Xbox 360 port of it that they did many moons ago. It was released sort of digitally, and it plays pretty well. But again, it just feels kind of wrong. If you want to play Jetpack, play it on a Spectrum. But alongside Jetpack, my pal had Trans Am. And Trans Am was a brilliant wee game, top-down sort of adventure game almost, arcade, drivey adventure game thing. I never knew what the actual premise of Trans Am was. I just knew I liked driving about, and God, it's been that long since I played it. I'm sure that you collect flags and stuff like that. You just drive about and find flags, and you have to pick up fuel and all that kind of stuff, and there's probably a bad guy chasing you. And I know when I put the screenshot up, whatever, that I'll remember, and I go, oh yeah, I remember that now. But as I'm recording these, I don't look at screens and all that before. I just kind of pull out the memories and then I put the screenshots in later. So, but yeah, I love Trans Am, and again, it looked really nice. The graphics were, I was going to say nice, they were functional, I suppose, in retrospect, but you know, back in the day I loved it. And because the cover artwork on these games as well set the premise for the whole thing. You know, so although you were looking at a simple little sprite, in your head you were driving that kind of dune buggy thing that's on the front of the cover. And it was just a great little game, and you know, it's quite simple. You just pick it up and you play it, and that's what I like in a game. I can't be bothered with having to read huge manuals or learn 5,000 keys or spend 5 years of my life playing a game, and that's why I don't play like RPGs and all that kind of stuff in big modern games. I've not got the time to invest. I can't be bothered. I want something, pick it up, play it, have fun, job done, good stuff. And that's what Trans Am delivers in spades. It's great. And I have to say, when I've finished this video, I'm probably going to fire the Spectrum up and have a go. But yeah, so Trans Am was great, but following on in the Ultimate series was Attic Attack, and again another Spectrum classic. And these, as far as I'm aware, these three games, Jetpack, Trans Am and Attic Attack, were never ported to anything else. I'm sure they were Spectrum exclusives. I might be wrong on that, but I certainly never saw them anywhere else. I know that games like Sabre Wolf and Night Lord and all that kind of stuff got ported to the different systems, but I'm pretty sure Attic Attack and Trans Am and Jetpack were Spectrum exclusives, and rightly so, because they were written for that machine and they remain tremendous games on that machine. Anything else would just feel like a kind of copy. But Attic Attack was brilliant, and again, it was the little quirky noises that made it for me. You know, the screens looked really nice, and it was a really nice sort of view, top-down, semi-isometric rooms with a flat-looking dude. And again, these games, they didn't need to make sense back in the day. You know, the fact that there was blobs or stuff chasing you and whatever, it was mad, but it was good fun. And you could pick, if I remember, you could pick a serf or a knight, or was it a wizard? You could pick different characters to play at the beginning of the game, and you had to kind of run about and find keys and things to unlock different bits. Don't know if it was a castle you were running about, and I can't remember. It sort of looked like a castle, dungeons or something, and you had to find stuff. And again, you know, playing these games back in the day, your pal didn't say to you, there's instructions, sit and read them, here's what we're doing. You just picked it up and they'd say, oh, click this, shoot that, bang, click this, run into that, shoot that, you know, whatever. So I've no idea what the premise of Attic Attack actually is, apart from you run about, you collect things and you avoid stuff. And I seem to remember your life gauge was a cooked chicken, and as it went down, it turned slowly into a sort of skeleton of a chicken. I seem to remember that bizarrely. But all these little things were great, and the noises in Attic Attack were tremendous. And I'm sure you kind of teleported in. Did you teleport in? And I seem to remember it making great noises, and you could go downstairs and all that kind of stuff. I loved all that stuff. So I've got a real soft spot. Although I was an Amstrad guy back in the day, you know, I like to think that I'm liberal enough not to just say Amstrad's best, everything else is rubbish. You know, I wasn't one of those guys in that kind of 8-bit wars camp. You know, I liked each machine for its strengths, and I loved the Spectrum for its strengths. Like I say, these three games that I've just mentioned. But I'm going to talk about some other games that I loved on the Spectrum now. One of them, again, I think a Spectrum exclusive, don't know that it was ported anywhere else. And it was one of the earliest games that I think I played, although Jetpack was the first game I actually played. In terms of kind of oldest software, it was a game called Wheelie. Now, Wheelie was one of these games that just didn't need to make sense at all. You were driving a high-powered motorbike in an underground cavern, which bizarrely managed to have double-decker buses in it and jumping hedgehogs, although the hedgehogs were the same size as a double-decker bus. Wheelie was a brilliant game. You were on a little bike, a sort of Kawasaki type motorbike, and you had to drive about this cavern, and there was little ramps that went down to different levels of the cavern, and you could do jumps over buses and things like that if you got the speed right. But you could crash and you could fall off your bike if you went up the ramp too slowly or quickly or whatever. So there was a lot of nice little touches in it, but the thing I remember seeing the first time I saw it was how detailed the sprites were. The little bike looked fantastic. You know, I think it's just white, but the wee bike looked like a wee guy on a proper motorbike. It looked really good. And when I look at it again, it might not be as good. You know, rose tinted glasses might kind of diffuse it a little bit. But I seem to remember the animation on it being really good as well. I seem to remember when you jumped the kind of bike, you know, it looked weighty. I know that sounds really stupid, but the physics in the game felt really good at the time. You had to get your speed just right to do jumps and things like that, or you would crash. And I'm sure when you crashed as well, it didn't just kind of disappear into a puff of smoke. I'm sure, did the guy not fall sideways off the bike or something? Oh god, I can't remember. I should really look at videos and remember how this goes. But I remember just loving Wheelie, and again, it's like a lot of the games back on the 8-bits, they didn't need to make sense. You know, it was a stupid premise, but it was great fun. And if you've never played Wheelie, I would thoroughly recommend that you go and have a go. So another Spectrum classic that I played was Manic Miner. Again, I think my first experience of Manic Miner was actually on the Amstrad. My pal had it, and he gave me a loan of it, and it was good. You know, I enjoyed it, and it wasn't at the time. It wasn't my type of game. I liked kind of runny, gunny, shooty arcade things. So the puzzly platform type games weren't really my thing. But excuse me, I had a go, and I died quickly. And then I had another go, and I died a little bit further on. And then I had another go, and I got to the end of the first screen. And then I died before I finished the first screen. But it was one of these really clever things where I realised that although I was dying, I was discovering what you need to do, and it kept me coming back and going on and on and on. And it was very clever, and I'd never really seen that in a game or been that sort of hooked way on a game. And it kind of opened me up to that type of game, that kind of single screen platformy puzzle thing. And I liked the Amstrad version, you know, like I say, it was the first time I'd ever played it, but then my pal showed me it on the Spectrum. And I don't know, it felt slightly faster, it felt a little bit smoother. And the noises, again, the noises all made sense. Because on an Amstrad, it was alright, but you had the music that kept playing the whole way through the thing, and that grated on you, although you could turn it off. But on the Spectrum, the little jump noise thing that he does was classic, and it's, you know, it's such a classic noise, and the fact that Miner Willie, when he jumps, his legs still keep going is brilliant. But Manic Miner on the Spectrum just kind of made sense, and it felt where it should be, which sort of, that probably sounds really stupid, but you know, sometimes when you play a game you just think, no, this is, but especially later on when I found out it was written for the Spectrum and then ported, it just felt right. The keys and all that kind of made sense on the Spectrum, and it played really well. Because when you're playing on the Spectrum as well, the keys, you know, if you imagine that sitting on a desk, your keys are just nice and handy. When you're playing it on the Amstrad was about that height, so your hands were floating and it didn't quite feel the same, which sounds kind of weird. I know I'm talking rubbish about some stuff, but it made sense on the Spectrum. And it was a great game, and my pal didn't really like it too much, but I used to go kind of have a shot at Manic Miner and would load that up, and I'd usually play it while he sat bored and reading his comics or something as I Hogby's Spectrum. But yeah, so Manic Miner. Everybody knows Manic Miner, classic. But the thing that I wanted to talk next about was, I've mentioned before that the Spectrum, I think, had its strengths over other systems. And I wanted to talk about some games that the Spectrum version is my favourite port. These are games that were across all the 8-bits, I think. Yeah, all the 8-bits. Most of them kind of arcade ports, but there's I'm just thinking, yeah, the games I'm going to, there's one non-arcade, one original game. But as everybody knows, I think I was a huge arcade guy back in the day, so when these games got ported to the 8-bit systems, you know, it was much excitement, because you got to play these arcade games in the house. Now, unfortunately, as we all know, most of the ports of arcade games aren't brilliant. You know, they're okay, and they managed to push the machines, but the machine just wasn't up to, you know, replicating the arcade in the home. Some of the versions did a very good attempt at it. Some of them just didn't work at all. But I had these games that I'm going to list off. There's 4 that I'm going to talk about. I had them all from Amstrad, and I really like all of them, bar one for the Amstrad. But the versions that I really like are the Spectrum versions. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Green Beret. I loved the arcade game. Was never that good at it, but I kept going back and having a go, and I really liked it. So when that came out, when I saw that came out for the Amstrad, you know, I'm like, I need to have Green Beret, I love it. So I got it, and when it loads up, it looks okay. You know, it's not the same as the arcade game, but the sprites look okay, and it's a passable attempt, and it looks alright. And you run about the first screen, and you can, you know, throw your knife about and do your stuff, and it all plays properly until you walk to the edge of the screen. And what happens on the Amstrad is you run along to the edge of the screen, and what should happen is the screen should start then scrolling. But what actually happens on the Amstrad is you get to the edge of the screen, and it pauses and goes and draws the next screen, and then you run into it, and then it goes and draw the next screen, and you're like, oh my god, who programmed this and thought that was a good idea? It completely ruins the whole game. The flow of the game is just completely knackered. So my pal had Green Beret on the Spectrum, and he showed me it, and I just loved it. It was, the sprites looked like the arcade version. Again, although it's, you know, 2 colours or whatever it was, monochrome, the detail on the sprites was fantastic. Your little guy looked like the guy for the arcade. The enemy sprites looked like the enemy from the arcade. And, you know, that high resolution thing just worked. And it's, now I've not played Green Beret on the Spectrum for years, but I'm pretty sure it scrolls horizontally like it should in the arcade. I don't remember it being a flick screen. You know, I might be wrong, but I'm sure it scrolled properly. But it was a great version. Like I say, it looked, to me, it was the closest out of the 3 8-bits to what the arcade was. Although the Commodore 64 was a great port as well, and it looked quite nice. The sprites were a representation of the arcade, as most of these things were. But the sprites in Green Beret on the Spectrum looked brilliant. And again, it's running 48K, you know, so it was running in less memory than the other 2 machines, but it still managed a great port, and it's fast and it's fluid, and again, the cool little noises that the Spectrum makes. You know, I think some people might see the Spectrum sound chip as a kind of little downside, because it didn't have the full kind of, you know, like the SID chip on the Commodore and all that kind of stuff. But to me, it's the whole package. It just works. It's appropriate for the machine, and that, you know, the untypable dead flesh keyboard and the kind of monochrome graphics and the beeper speaker. That all just works as a nice little package of Spectrum awesomeness, and it's what makes the Spectrum what it is, and it makes it. I love it. I love that kind of combination of stuff. You know, if you upgraded it and you stuck 256K on it, or when the Plus came out with the kind of proper, in quotes, keyboard, it just didn't look right or feel. It didn't look like a Spectrum. To me anyway. And if you got a, I think there's been, or was it in the Plus series of machines? I can't remember, the AY chip, which is what the Amstrad used. I've seen Spectrum ports with AY chip usage, so somewhere along the line the AY chip was introduced. But again, it just feels kind of wrong. The Spectrum should be, the little beeper. But anyway, Green Beret was a great little game. And the Spectrum port was my favourite out of the three kind of 8 bits. And in the same vein, Robocop. Loved the arcade game, absolutely loved it. Loved the movie, as probably every 80s kid did. And when the home ports came out, now I never actually played the Commodore 64 version of Robocop, but I've got the Amstrad version obviously, and it was really nice and it looks pretty good, but Robocop just looks like a bloke in a tinfoil suit, and it plays alright, it plays quite well and all that kind of stuff, and there's nothing wrong with it, and it's perfectly playable, and I loved it back in the day. But the Spectrum version, again, because of the high resolution sprites, Robocop looked like Robocop. It looked chunky and like Robocop. and it played really well. The Spectrum version of Robocop just plays so well. And it's probably down to for me anyway, it's down to the way that the graphics look. And I'm not going to talk about too much about these games because everybody knows what these games are like. But it's just I wanted to point out that my favourite version of these games was the Spectrum probably because of the high resolution graphics, and just the fact, like I say, that the sprites looked proper, like they should, rather than representations of them. The next game that I want to talk about is now this would be a fine line between for me the Amstrad and the Spectrum versions. Both have their strengths. The Amstrad version of this game looks brilliant, and it sounds brilliant, and it looks not arcade perfect, of course it doesn't, but it looks like a really good representation of the arcade, and it plays really well, and it's fast, and it's a great game. But the Spectrum version, again, although it's monochrome, the sprites look a lot better. The game plays really well, and this is, if you have 128K, you get full arcade speech and all that kind of stuff, and arcade sound effects, like samples basically. And my god, it runs like shit off a well-oiled shovel. It's so fast and playable and smooth. The Amstrad version is great. At times it can feel a little bit sluggish, you kind of move the joystick and then the car will go if there's a lot happening on screen, but the Spectrum just keeps chunking along at high speed. And anyway, the game I'm talking about is Chase HQ. Love the arcade game, brilliant arcade game. It's one of my favourite racers, probably more so than the likes of Outrun and stuff like that, although it was the Outrun kind of engine that they used, I think. Well, no, that's not true, because it was Tato's version of Outrun basically. But the Spectrum and the Amstrad versions, the 8-bit versions, were fantastic. And I think I'm right in saying it was Bill Harbison that did the graphics for both. I hope that I'm right in saying that. He certainly did the Amstrad version. I'm sure he did the Spectrum version as well. But it's so good. The Spectrum version is so good, and I think it's kind of generally recognised that the Chase HQ on the Spectrum is one of the best 8-bit ports of an arcade game, just for its playability and the high resolution graphics. And if you could squeeze the colours into that, it would have been arcade perfect. But great version, and like I say, it would be a real close tie between that and the Amstrad for my favourite 8-bit version. So yeah, but anyway, play Chase HQ on the Spectrum, brilliant game. And the last game that I want to talk about, because I'm sure you'll be getting bored of me talking about all this crap, is again it would be I think I probably slightly prefer the Amstrad version. Don't shoot me. But again, it would be a very fine line between the Amstrad and the Spectrum version. And that game is an original game. It's called Exelon. Now, Exelon was, I first played it on the Spectrum. My mate Blair had it, and I loved it. My kind of game. Run about, shoot stuff. Slight puzzle element to it. But again, it's one of these games that you just instantly knew how to play it. You know, the first screen tells you everything you need to know on how to play this game. You know, you can shoot your gun. You've got a rocket pack to blow stuff up that you can't walk past. And you have to just shoot the enemies. And as the game progresses, it gets harder and harder, obviously, and there's different things start coming that you have to work out different stuff. But it was such a good game, and it looked really nice on the Spectrum. You know, it just, and the animation of the main character and stuff, you know, looked great. He kind of lumbers along with this kind of exoskeleton suit on and all that kind of stuff, and it just, great game. And it was so colourful. All the little enemies and stuff were all different colours and things, and it worked really well. Really showed what the Spectrum could do, you know, in that time frame. So I can't mind when Exelon came out, 86, something like that, maybe 85, 86. So it really showed, you know, there was a lot of stuff on screen, and there was no slowdown and all that kind of thing. You know, it was a kind of real powerhouse, and it was, I think it pretty much made Raphael, I think it's Raphael Checo, I think that's how you pronounce his name, and it pretty much made him a household name. And he had a string of hits after Exelon. You know, he had like the Cybernoid series and all that kind of stuff. But Exelon was fantastic, and on the Amstrad it plays as well as the Spectrum. You know, it's got a little more colour in it. The characters got more colour in it. It does suffer a little bit from slowdown if there's lots of stuff on the screen. But again, it would be a real toss-up between which version I prefer. But such a good game, and it was one of these games that I remember. It had a screen in it. There was a game, Bruce Lee, the game in Bruce Lee. There was a screen in it that everybody remembers where it was different to all the rest, and it was a laser room screen, and it was a screen with, I think, like 3 levels, and there was lasers kind of punting across that killed you instantly, so you had to time it, and it was a real kind of run and jump and get all your timings right. And the first time you played it, it just, you know, killed you straight away, and it was really frustrating, and you kept trying it. And there's a couple of screens in Exelon like that, where you basically die the first time you go into the screen, because you don't know what you're doing, and it's different to anything that's happened in the game before. But you rapidly recognise what you have to do, and I love games like that that just challenge you instantly. You know, where you have to think, right, God, I just died, what happened? And then you realise what you have to do. And one of the first screens in Exelon that does that is there's a sort of double cannon thing that sits, and it fires, as you walk towards it, it starts firing bullets, but they're running at 2 heights. They're running at different heights. And what you have to do is walk towards it and shoot. And the thing is, as well, is you don't recognise it first. You start shooting the kind of, you realise that the bullets are coming at the right height for you to shoot them. But then the lower ones, you have to crouch to shoot them. So you stand for ages and you kind of shoot. You know, you're just kind of standing and crouching, shooting these things, and then you realise that you're running out of bullets and this thing's no stopping. So you have to advance towards it. And as you advance towards it, you know, you have to kind of walk forward and shoot, and then duck and shoot, and walk and duck and shoot, and it's this kind of really bizarre. It's like a Monty Python sketch where he's kind of walking and ducking and kind of moving about, and then eventually, when you get next to the gun, it stops shooting, and you get loads of bonus points. And I think it's that same screen that then you teleport you and you can upgrade your gun and you get double shots. But that screen, I remember that screen for the first time just thinking, how the hell do I get past this? And really having to kind of think and get back to, and I think I died and then had to go back to the start of the game and play through. But again, you played through and you could run through the first bits and you got to that and then you gave it a shot and you kept going and it was great. And then there's another screen you walk into, and as soon as you walk into it, you die because there's these big columns that kind of come out the ground, and as soon as you walk into the screen, the column just kills you. So you realise when you walk in, you have to kind of jump straight over and get into safety. But I think there's 3 columns all doing different things, and you have to time it and get it right in between the two columns that are coming up. Oh, it's a real kind of pixel perfect jumping thing that you have to do in there. But aye, excellent, such a good game, and again, if you haven't played it, go and play it immediately. If you haven't played it, why not? You know. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking now. I hope you've enjoyed this little trip down memory lane about the kind of the best, not the best games on the Spectrum, but for me, the games that really kind of showed this what the Spectrum could do, and you know, it's what it was meant for. You know, these games kind of really showed the Spectrum in its best light, for me. And I know there are games that are regarded as more classics and all that kind of stuff, and technically more impressive. But for me, these were the machines that kind of really sealed the Spectrum into a special place in my heart. That meant, you know, when I started collecting all my retro stuff, that I had to have a Spectrum. So yeah. Anyway, let me know what your memories of the Spectrum are, what your favourite games and all that kind of stuff are. Like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.